I didn't really worry when my daughter got this imaginary friend because kids do that, right? They make up unicorns and space captains, talk to their stuffed bear like it's their own therapist. This is normal, healthy behavior. Hell, even as an adult, I talk to myself to navigate sticky situations. So we humored it, the way you humor a 7-year-old who insists she's a firefighter at breakfast and then a mermaid by lunch. But what bothered me was the way that she stood with her ear up against the drywall. "Shh," she'd say, holding up a finger without even looking at me. "Mr. Scratchy is sleeping." The first time she said his name, I laughed, but my wife didn't. We were loading up the dishwasher and both heard a faint drag of something inside the kitchen wall, like grit under a fingernail. It was soft, so we thought maybe we imagined it. The house itself is pretty old. Old houses settle, pipes knock, rodents will take tours. We did that parent shrug and the adult thing when you look at the ceiling instead of at each other. That night though, I found this chalky dust on my daughter's pillow. She'd been pressing her head to the wall again. "He talks better at night," she whispered to me when I asked. "He's closer, so clear, I can hear every word he says." "Closer to what, baby?" I asked. She smiled like I'd missed the obvious. "To getting out." Mr. Scratchy lived in the wall, not behind it, not in the room next door, inside of the wall. She drew pictures of him at the dining room table. Long bodies that didn't really make sense, torsos like fence slats, arms that reached through every room. A face that was only really a mouth and lines where the cheeks should be, as if his head was made of some kind of comb. She drew him really small at first, tucked into the corner of a box labeled "My Room." Over a week or so, he continued to grow, got longer, and in the last drawing she did, he reached up, hand flattened, feeling around inside the ceiling. We continued to talk about it and said, "Of course, it's mice, it's raccoons. We'll get somebody out here to take a look at it." I even bought some traps, the humane ones, and of course didn't catch anything. But we continued to hear things, and it seemed to get almost worse. A faint ticking in the hall by the linen closet, a slow scrape in the living room around midnight, like a chair leg being dragged across the floor. Sometimes it would click 3 times, pause, and then click again. My wife asked me if that meant anything, and I told her the obvious, that I didn't know. Not long after this, our daughter set up these new rules. Her bed had to be pushed up against the north wall. The closet door had to stay open a little. No fan at night. He doesn't like the wind. When I asked her who told her that, she didn't say Mr. Scratchy this time. She said, "The man in the walls," whatever the hell that meant. She started whispering into the hairline crack near the baseboard. I caught her doing it a few times, kneeling with both palms on the floor. Her lips were barely moving. If I leaned in, I could hear her side of it. Okay. No, I can't. My dad's home." Sometimes I could see plumes of dust coming out of the wall, like the wall had exhaled. The drywall dust showed up under her nails next too. Now I know what you're thinking, because it's the same thing we did. Somebody is actually living in our walls. A drifter, a squatter, some nightmare from a news headline you scroll past because you don't live in that kind of neighborhood, right? Except it's a stupid idea until you stand in your own hallway at 2 a.m. and feel a vibration pass under your feet. Not the thud of a furnace, not the rattle of a pipe, a steady hum of life, like somebody drumming their fingers on the other side of the wall. "Stop it," my wife said from the doorway. "Please." The wall seemed to answer with this soft click, and then silence followed. My daughter from her bed. "He heard you." The more we tried to ignore all this, the more the house made it almost impossible. It started with these secrets. My daughter would be coloring at the kitchen table, not even looking up, and when she'd say something like, "Mommy doesn't like it when you work late," or "Daddy hit the bottle in the garage." Things that we never discussed directly in front of her, things we didn't even say out loud. When I asked her where she heard that, she shrugged and dragged another crayon hard enough across the page to tear it in the moment. "Mr. Scratchy told me." I laughed, because again, that's what you do when your stomach drops, and you want to pretend it's actually nothing. My wife, again, didn't laugh. She didn't relax anywhere in that house for close to a week. Was pacing, cleaning, watching everything all the time. The noises would continue in patterns. First, it was that odd tapping in the wall near the stairs, then in the living room too. It was always late, always when the house was supposed to be sleeping too. Sometimes it ticked 3 times, paused, and then 2 more. That same weird little ditty. One night, I pressed my ear up to the plaster, and on the other side, I heard something drag. My daughter's bed ended up shoved against the north wall, just as she demanded it to be. She slept with one arm dangling down, palm flat on the baseboard, as if she was holding somebody's hand through the wall itself. Then came the scratches. We found them behind her dresser, long, straight, vertical gouges, deep enough to score the wood, but too high up for her to really reach. Now, at first, I did blame her. Maybe she whacked the wall with something, except the cuts weren't really like random. They looked like tally marks, groups of 5, 11 total of them. The next day, we tore the wall open because I was sure I was gonna find something, a nest of rats, a raccoon carcass. Instead, there was nothing but insulation and studs. No tunnels, no droppings, not even the dust was disturbed. The contractor that we called shook his head and said, if you've got any critters, they ain't in here. Now, you think that would have calmed me down, but for some reason, it didn't. It almost made it worse because my daughter got worse. She stopped eating. She wouldn't sit at the dinner table anymore. She would stare at the wall, lips moving to words that I couldn't really hear or make out. At night, she would whisper, "He says he's almost free." Free? What does that mean? The night that everything came to a head, I woke up to silence. No house hum, no pipes, no wind. My wife laying beside me, mouth slack with sleep. The hallway was dark as hell, and I wandered the hall until something actually caught my eye. My daughter's bed was empty. Her blanket trailed into the hallway, and I followed it, bare feet cold up against the wood floor. Down the hall I heard it, the steady, angry scrape of something against the wall. I didn't really know what to expect, so I pressed on. I found her in front of the linen closet, palms pressed up against the wall, her nails raw and bleeding as she just continued to claw against it. Her cheek was resting against it as well, eyes half-lidded, mouth whispering, "Almost, almost, almost." "Stop," I begged, pulling her back, and she screamed, but not at me, at the wall. "He's stuck, let him out." And then we got an answer. This rasping drag from inside, so close that it made the drywall tremble. Long, deep scratches, like somebody actually was coming through the wall. I watched the plaster flex, I swear to God I did. Like something pushing from the other side, swelling the paint into this pale blister. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. All I could do was shield my daughter, who seemed entranced by the sight of it all. My wife came running, hair wild, eyes bloodshot. "What is it?" The wall continued to groan, fibers splintering, and from somewhere deep in the house, a chorus of tapping began, fast and incessant. Hundreds of little clicks answering back and forth inside the framework of our home. I grabbed our daughter and we ran. She fought us the whole time, shrieking, telling us, "Don't leave him alone." But that scratching grew louder, chasing us down the hallway, following us through the kitchen. As we slammed the back door open, I swear I heard words in it, some kind of rhythm, a voice almost, scraping syllables through the plaster as well. We didn't stop running until the car was tearing down the street, headlights flooding empty pavement. From the rear seat, our daughter sat quietly now, breathing shallow, one gulp at a time, and she whispered to herself and not to us directly, "He's gonna be so angry." We didn't go back the next day or the day after. My wife begged me the whole time to sell the place, to take the loss and just start over. We stayed with her sister 2 towns over, all of us crammed into the spare bedroom. Our daughter curled between us like a shield. She still wasn't talking much, and when she did, it was in these fragments. "Don't let him follow us. He doesn't like cars. He's making a door." Okay, so kids process things strangely, right? Trauma will bend them. They make shapes out of fear so it feels smaller, something they can handle. But the way she said it all, flat, matter of fact. It made me sick. What the hell did I do to my child? I hired some pest control service and then a contractor and then another. Each one would come out, bang on the walls, inspect the attic, the crawl space. They all pretty much said the same thing. No rodents, no water damage, no structural issues. The last guy, this older carpenter with hands like slabs, squinted at me and said, "Look, sir, you sure you're not hearing things? I got tinnitus. I hear weird stuff all the time. It happens." But those marks were real, and when I finally went back to pack up some clothes, I found new gouges in the drywall. They were a lot higher this time, almost ceiling height. They weren't random scratches anymore either. They were curled up into these crude shapes, letters maybe, or some weird attempt at them. In the quiet of the house, I just stood there listening and heard nothing. Then, not long after, faint as breath against glass, a single drag across the wall behind me. I turned and there was nothing but white paint and shadows, but I just left the house immediately. The realtor said the house would need repainting, maybe some patchwork. She didn't even ask about the scratches, and we didn't volunteer any information, just paid for it and moved on. Our daughter won't sleep near walls anymore. She insists her bed stays in the middle of whatever room she's in, blankets spread around her like a moat. At night, sometimes she'll still jolt up awake, gasping and pressing her palms to her ears. Occasionally I'll ask what she hears, and she just shakes her head and whispers, "I thought I heard the walls again." I pretend to not understand, like that really takes much. I tuck her in, I tell her she's safe now, but when I close my eyes, I still see that drywall flexing, ballooning under the weight of something unhuman. I feel the clicks of fingernails wrapping in code beneath the plaster. And sometimes when the house that we're in now gets quiet enough, I swear that I can hear it again, faintly dragging itself under the floorboards, like Mr. Scratchy never needed a house at all, like he was just waiting for us to bring him somewhere new. On a Tuesday afternoon, my son came home with gravel in his scalp and a new rule. This was several years ago, still when he was a young boy. "Don't climb higher than your hands can hold," he said, serious as a judge. It was pretty funny to watch. The man who runs the playground told me so. I went from laughing to a little more serious. Which man?" I asked, rinsing grit from his hair in the sink. He blinked at me like I should already know. "The keeper." I laughed because that's really what you do when a 6-year-old invents a job title for a ghost. "Really? Okay, well, what's he like?" "Old. His mouth looks ripped." He dragged a finger from cheek to chin, like tracing a long seam. "He stands by the swings and watches me to make sure that we're fair." I was still smiling when he added, "And we don't tell grown-ups his rules either." I quickly dried his hair and told myself he'd picked all this up from a TV show, because where else would he get all this? But that night, when the dishwasher was humming in the background and my phone was trying to sell me some snack subscriptions, I couldn't stop seeing that finger drawing that line across his face. What a weird detail to share. Wednesday at pickup, I hung back near the fence with the other parents. The playground sits in a pocket behind the daycare, a rectangle of mulch and sun-faded equipment, bordered by chain link and a scrim of trees where the property drops into a shallow green belt. The air smelled like hot plastic. Kids were running, squealing, colliding. Normal. Definitely saw no rip-lip ghost telling the kids how they should play. Then I heard a boy hiss to another, "Shh, he's checking." And then 3 kids snapped into silence on the balance beam. My son was among them. He stared at the fence like there was a principal standing there, and I followed his gaze. I only saw trees, only that dim strip of shade. At the gate, a mom with a coffee said, "Do your kids also talk about the man who runs this place?" My mouth went dry. "Yeah, the keeper?" Her eyebrow lifted. Yeah, that's what mine calls him too. Two more parents must have heard our conversation and turned to chime in as well. Scar on his face? One asked. Melted boots? Said another. We all found ourselves laughing uncomfortably. A teacher then popped the latch with a jangly key ring and gave us the practice smile of somebody one tantrum away from a clock out. Question, I asked. Do you have maybe like a grounds guy, older, scar on his face? No, she said. We have a landscaping service. Why do you ask? Behind her, the swings were creaking, but there wasn't any kids on them. The chains moved anyway, soft and steady. Just curious, thank you. And with that, I just let the whole thing die. That night, my son repeated a new rule as he brushed his teeth. Don't climb higher than your hands can hold, he said, looking at himself in the mirror. And don't bring grown-ups. Who told you that, buddy? He spat, wiped his mouth, and didn't smile. The keeper says that the rules are for the kids. Grown-ups break things, ruin stuff. By the second week, the whispers about the keeper were spreading like a high fever. Parents traded quick, nervous jokes in the parking lot, but no one laughed for real. My son's rules continued to grow stranger as well, like this list being dictated from somewhere that I couldn't quite reach. Don't tell secrets. Don't touch the slide unless he says it's okay. Don't go home until he says. Don't get too close to the other kids. I continued to try to pry, asking where this man had come from, but he'd clam up now, eyes glazed over with the kind of stubbornness you can't really negotiate with. He'd only mutter occasionally, "The keeper doesn't like questions." Well, you aren't the keeper. You're my son. This made him waver a little, and for a second, I thought he might give up the act and actually talk to me. Instead, he just gave me this really super creepy smile and shook his head no. So on one Friday, I ended up lingering in the parking lot, pretending to text while my boy was playing. He froze suddenly halfway up the jungle gym. His gaze then tilted past me, toward the chain link fence. His little chin lifted up in a nod, like acknowledging some kind of instructions. Then he climbed down, calm as a soldier, following the orders. I spun towards the fence. Nothing but the shallow tree line. Still, I'll admit that something did feel off. A ball rolled across the mulch, bumping up against my shoe. I didn't see a kid kick it. The swings were moving again, chain squeaking in this uneven rhythm, like somebody had just stepped away. There appeared to be lots of movement on the playground, but none of the kids were actually moving, so it made me uneasy. When I asked him later who he was nodding to, he responded with, "Don't make him mad, Dad, please." Not long after this, bruises started showing up on him, not huge ones or obvious ones, like knees scraped raw, scratches along the forearm, a swollen lip, a big black spot up on his arms and legs. The keeper pushed me so I'd learn. And that's what another kid said to his mother as well when she demanded to know why her daughter had came home limping. I overheard the staff brushing it off. Kids roughhouse, it's fall, they're climbing more. But the tone was brittle and defensive, like they'd heard this all before. That night, I dug through the archives at the old town library, scrolling microfilm until my eyes were burning. And buried in this yellowed column from 30 years ago was a name, Walter Pike, former groundskeeper of that very same property back when it was a schoolyard. He'd been burned in this maintenance accident, face half melted by a ruptured boiler. Reports painted him as a strict, frightening, and obsessed with keeping order. Rumors followed him. Kids complained that he grabbed them a little too hard, locked them up in supply sheds. He was once even dismissed for a week for knocking a student's front teeth out with a mop handle. The last article was just barely even a whisper. Local man vanishes amid accusations. And there wasn't any follow-up, just kind of gone. One rainy afternoon, I arrived a little late for pickup and the lot was empty. The building was locked up and my son wasn't inside. Panic slammed into me immediately. I ran the perimeter until I heard his voice, faint at the far corner of the playground. There he stood at the fence, forehead pressed up against the metal, lips moving like he was being fed some kind of line. "Hey buddy," I shouted, chest ripping open with relief. He turned his head slowly and his face looked all wrong. It was dull, detached. "He says you can't be here. You broke the rules." I felt something hit my cheek. A stone had struck me, and blood quickly filled my mouth. I staggered, eyes watering, over to the fence, and beyond it in the dimming woods, a silhouette stood just out of reach of light. Crooked posture, tall, one shoulder higher than the other. I couldn't see any kind of face though. When I blinked, he stepped backward into the trees. My son's tiny hand clutched up against the fence. It made him mad. The following day, I asked, and the school swore there was nothing unusual on the cameras. They showed me the footage, grainy clips of kids running, falling, laughing, but no fence line silhouette, no thrown rocks, no scarred old man. Just kids and my son talking to an empty air like it was perfectly normal. I pressed a little harder, and the director leaned back in her chair, lips tight. "If you're gonna accuse us of negligence, maybe this isn't the right place for your child." And that was that. The other parents didn't really need convincing. 2 of them pulled their kids out immediately, and by next week, 3 more followed. We whispered in the parking lots to each other, voices low. None of us really wanted to be the one who say it outright, but the kids weren't making this up. Something was going on. Occasionally at night, my boy will still whisper to somebody that I couldn't see. I'd hear him in his room, crouched by the window, voice really hushed. "Yes, keeper, I will, I won't tell. Yes, keeper, yes, keeper." Once, I pushed the door open fast, just to test him. He spun eyes wide, guilty as hell. "He says you're not allowed in here," he whispered. "He says you'll ruin his plan." I pulled him from school. Thought the distance might break this whole spell, and for a few days it did work. No rules, no muttering, just my boy again. Then, one day we drove past the playground. The place was empty. Chain link gate padlocked, mulch soaked dark from the recent rain, but one swing moving slowly and steady. Creak, 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 and it gave me the heebies, I'm not even gonna lie. From the back seat, my son pressed his face to the window, his breath fogging up the glass. His voice was flat, eerie, and calm for a child his age. "He's still there, Dad, waiting for me. He wants to push me on the swing." I gripped the wheel, knuckles bone white, heart ready to explode. Because through the fence, under the dim security light, I saw something too. Not a blur, not a trick of the shadows. An old man in torn work pants, heavy boots, scars slicing his face into 2 cruel halves. One hand on the chain of the swing, the other raised, palm out, as if claiming what was his. And my son, my little boy, raised his hand back to him. Like a promise. It terrified me, and to this day, we don't drive by that playground. We got our son into some therapy and spent more one-on-one time with him, doing outdoor activities, everything we can to break whatever spell that keeper had on him. Well, on all of those children, I guess. I used to tell people that I never really had any kind of imaginary friend when I was little, but that was a lie. I did, and his name was Freckles. I've told this story online before, so if you've heard it, hello once again. He wasn't really that kind of imaginary friend that kids brag about. No tea parties or pirate adventures. No goofy made-up jokes. Freckles wasn't fun. He was disgusting. He had skin like Play-Doh left out in the sun, gray and rubbery, dotted with these big pores that pulsed like zits. Tiny black hairs that wormed in and out of them and never still, and that's what I thought they were, zits. Once when we first met, I asked him what they were, put on a funny face, and in his best Italian accent said, "It's just a cilia." I didn't know what that meant, and I only knew about the Italian accent because of a little game called Mario. Freckles sounded just like him when he said that. His head was way too big, his face was way too small, like he'd been pressed into the middle of a balloon. His hands and feet were just nubs, no fingers, no toes, and he waved those nubs around, giggling in this squeaky, wet sound that would stick in your ears. At first, it was fine. It was okay, friendly, helpful even, until he started having fun pulling pranks. He would hide my toys and eventually the remote and family shared items around the house. Eventually, this would lead me into getting into trouble, and I didn't realize it when I was a kid, but Freckles was setting me up for the long haul. Now, here's the creepiest thing about Freckles. I never asked for him, never created him. I met Freckles. He came to me when I was playing alone one day, and then didn't leave me alone for years after. When I was 6, Freckles made me play with roadkill. Poke it, he'd giggle, and I'd jab at some dead squirrel or a flattened bird with a stick until guts would leak out. He laughed the hardest when it would stink, and if I started to cry, he would really start to laugh. One summer, he told me to play tag with our dog Jake. This involved letting Jake out of the yard, which I knew was bad, but it had to be done if I wanted the game to actually happen. So I let the gate slip and out went the dog, and so the game began. Jake came back whimpering. His back leg was bleeding where it had been chewed raw. And I knew it was Freckles, even though I was the one who got blamed. My parents grounded me for a week, and Freckles just stood there in the corner, giggling until I cried myself to sleep. Then one day, around 8 years old I'd say, he just kind of stopped showing up. I remember looking into the corners expecting him and finding nothing. I thought maybe finally I'd beaten him, that it was just something that I'd grown out of, and for years I didn't really think about him at all. Until that morning in 8th grade. It was gray and cold outside, October drizzle. I couldn't stay dry if my life depended on it. I was walking to the bus stop, heavy backpack on my shoulders, when I heard this yelp, high and terrified. The kind that slices right into your chest. It came from over in the Lambert's yard. Their old shepherd Daisy was limping frantically in little circles, back end dragging like it wasn't working quite right. The fur along her flank was ripped open, wet and red. I froze on the sidewalk, my stomach turning over. That kind of injury, I've seen it before. I hadn't thought about it in years now, but it had come back in a flash. Jake's leg, the blood, the look in his eyes, and I felt my throat close up. That's when the bus pulled up, brakes screaming, doors creaking open and kids pushing on, laughing, yelling. I turned and for the first time in years, there was Freckles. He was standing at the fence line just beyond Daisy's yard. Same awful balloon head, same blank little face, same squirming hairs poking out from his pores. He hadn't aged a day. He raised up one little nub and waved at me, slow and animated like. I stumbled onto the bus, my knees didn't quite hold me up, and dropped into a seat and gripped the vinyl. I couldn't stop looking out the window. There really was a part of me that couldn't believe it was happening again. Freckles was imaginary, so why didn't I get to choose when I saw him? He trotted along the fence as the bus pulled away, keeping pace, his giant head bobbing, and when the bus finally turned the corner, he stopped and raised his face up to the glass and giggled. It carried through the window, I swear it did. Even the kid in front of me turned around. And just like that, Freckles was back in my life. By the time my bus lurched back into school, my stomach was in knots. I told myself I'd imagined him, that the rain and the fog had blurred things together, that Daisy's entry had just pulled some old memory up from the grave. But when I shoved my locker open, that lie quickly collapsed, because inside, crammed in the narrow space, was a bird, or what was left of one. Its wings were snapped, twisted behind it like broken arms, beak bent sideways, and it smelled hot pennies and road tar, blood and asphalt. That giggle floated from behind me. I whipped around, heart going, but the hallway was just a crush of kids, Deacon and his goons, freshmen clutching binders, teachers yelling for order. No balloon head, no warm hair pores, no stubby waving arms, but I knew he was back. I knew he was here. Lunch ended up being worse. I was sitting alone, tray half empty, choking down this dry sandwich. And then it happened, a splat. A milk carton burst against the back of my neck, white soaking into my collar. The table of 8th graders across from me howled. I spun around furious, ready to throw something back, and when I noticed something under the table, tiny face grinning, nubs tapping the floor. He leaned down, lips pressed to the puddle of milk spreading across the tile, and slurped at it. His pores gaped, leaking white as the little hairs waved and twitched, drinking it all in. His head then snapped toward me, eyes blank marbles, and He giggled again, milk bubbling at the corners of his mouth. "Good to see you again, buddy." "Get away from me," is all I could get out, and all he did was laugh in response. I went to kick under the table, but he vanished right in front of me, and the laughter above me, the real laughter, then got louder. Walking home, I took the long route, thinking maybe I could shake him, but he followed me, always just a little behind, hiding badly like he wanted me to know he was there, his head poking over the trash can lid, his nubs gripping slats of a fence. Once, a bottle cap zinged off the back of my calf, followed by that squeaky little giggle. By the time I got home, my legs were shaking, and my mom barely even looked up from her phone when I told her that Daisy was hurt. "It was probably another coyote," she said. I wanted to scream in response, because I know it wasn't a coyote, it was him. But the words were lodged in my throat. Saying his name aloud felt like some kind of invitation, so I wasn't gonna do that. But it didn't stop. The next day in the locker room after PE, I opened up my locker to find something else had been left for me. What appeared to be a cat's tail. Freckles loved messing with the local pet population. I gagged and slammed the locker shut, and from the shower stalls, hidden by the steam, came that same giggle, squeaky and relentless. I didn't shower. I didn't even take a breath until I was outside again. But the bathroom, God, the bathroom was the worst. It was between classes. Hall's pretty much empty. I'd been holding it all morning. My bladder was now screaming at me. I ducked into the upstairs bathroom, shoved the stall shut, and dropped onto the seat. Silence followed, but then I heard a door open. Thud, 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 something heavy jogging to the row outside. Far too heavy for sneakers, and it sounded pretty terrifying. I raised my feet so no shadow would give me away, but the footsteps stopped outside my stall, and a shadow then fell across the crack. My chest seized. Freckles leaned down, his head filling up that sliver of space. His skin was rubber, gray pores pulsing, hairs twitching as if it was sniffing itself. He looked under the door cartoonishly, sweeping back and forth until he pretended to finally spot me. I was totally exposed, pants around my ankles. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but who would come and stop something that was only in my head? Freckles laughed, a honking sound, then went upright again. I stared at the stall door and waited. As I looked through the crack between the wall and the door, I realized that Freckles was peeking in through the gap, eyes open wide, mouth even wider, smiling and trying not to laugh. When we made eye contact, I froze. He pressed his cheek up against the door, squishing flat. Then I saw his tongue. It slithered up the crack, pink and gray, riddled with pocks like his skin. Each pore spit a bead of foul slime that dragged as he licked from hinge to latch. The sound, oh my God. It almost made bile crawl up my throat, and the smell was worse, almost like all his silly little gap teeth were rotting. He licked the gap from floor up to the lock, nasty tongue filling up all the space. The tongue paused at the lock, then it wriggled, pressing and probing. Freckles giggled, then followed, bubbling and high-pitched. I could move, I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, head tilted, one giant marbled eye peeking through the seam, staring directly at me. And then, like a kid sprinting away from some kind of prank, he bolted off, nubs slapping the tiles in a frantic gallop, giggles echoing until silence found me again. A minute later, I stumbled out shaking. The floor was streaked with wetness, thin lines of slime that had already evaporated, leaving behind only dotted stains like little breadcrumbs, I guess. On the bus home that afternoon, it started up again. The roof banged really hard and the whole bus shuddered. The driver swore that he'd clipped a tree branch. The kids shrieked and laughed. I looked up just as the emergency hatch was rattling. A single wet eye peered down through the crack, rolling in its socket, staring right at me. Mom didn't notice when I ran to my room and slammed the door. Didn't notice me shoving my dresser up against it either. My sister did though. She knocked once and then whispered, "Why are you playing with Freckles again?" The air left my lungs and my skin went cold. I didn't answer, couldn't even bring myself to. How the hell did she know about him? That night from my bedroom window, I saw him again, standing under the streetlight, his balloon head nodding back and forth. He was holding something in one nub hand, dangling. I squinted, heart clawing at my throat. It was Daisy's collar. He raised his other nub and waved, slow and happily. I thought maybe if I just keep my head down, ignore him, he'd get bored. That's what imaginary friends do, right? Fade out if you stop feeding into them. But Freckles wasn't fading. It was almost sharpening, getting realer and realer, more pronounced every day. Okay, let me explain something to you. You see, when I first met Freckles, he was kind, transparent, see-through. He was like made of fog, and because of this, it was actually kind of cute. I couldn't see his creepier features in those early days. But as time went on, he started to gain form. He became less transparent and more solid, and by this point, in 8th grade, he was damn near tangible. Because of this, he was creepier than ever. I wish you could see the wrinkles, the wriggling hairs, the craters of pores. It was disgusting. One night I woke up to find him leaning over me, watching me sleep. He was so close, only inches from my face, and I could really see him then. The pores, the wriggling worm threads, how deep they were into his face. I jumped and he laughed and told me it was okay. He was just happy to see me again. I told him that I'm scared, that I want him to go. He said he would watch me sleep for a bit longer and then he would leave. I closed my eyes and pretended to go back to sleep. As I did, I watched from beneath my eyelashes as Freckles picked at his face, eventually pulling something away. It took me a second to realize that he plucked one of those worm thread things from one of the pores. He played with it for a while before slowly lowering it down over my face. I screamed and jumped, tried to get away. With my eyes open now, I could see that Freckles almost looked sick. His eyes were sunken. He was covered with more pores than ever before, and when I screamed, he genuinely looked hurt and startled. He slapped a nub hand over my mouth and tried to get me to be quiet, begging me, saying that we would be brother and sister or father and daughter, some kind of creepy family relationship. I didn't care. I kicked and kept screaming. Freckles let me go, plodded over into the closet and closed the door behind him. Eventually, my dad came running in and I told him everything. He sighed, sat down, and then actually shared his own little confession. You used to scream about somebody named Freckles when you were little, he said to me. It got so bad we almost took you to therapy. We compared notes for a while, and for the most part, my dad was satisfied with many of my red flags. Everything appeared to be a rehash of one of my childhood memories or another, and I almost felt like it was really all in my head. That part was the part that scared us the most, my dad said. It was when you started using words you'd never heard before. I asked him what he meant. Well, when all this started, you were young, 4 maybe or something. You had a very limited vocabulary, but sometimes when telling us about your conversations with Freckles, you would say things that you'd never heard before because there's no way you did. Like what? I asked him. Well, one night after a night like this, Freckles had scared you. I suggested that perhaps maybe you shouldn't be friends with him anymore. You said that Freckles told you that you two had to be friends because you were an army brat. I nodded, remembering Freckles saying that actually. Well, nobody's ever said the words army brat to you before. I have no idea how you picked it up. My skin went cold. There were lots of stories like this, either little me using terms that I shouldn't have known or knowing things that only my parents knew. It got so creepy they considered having their base house cleansed and exorcised. Before I could reply, the closet door creaked open and I froze. I'd forgotten that Freckles had ran in there, and my dad slowly turned and looked into the darkness. He went in there, I said. My dad turned to look at me, and for the first time he looked horrified. No, he didn't. Freckles isn't real. You had a bad dream. Now go back to bed, son. And with that, my dad said goodnight and went back to his room. I'm not really sure what the takeaway was that night. Did we actually dismiss Freckles, or did we collectively agree that he actually might be real? Regardless, I don't see him anymore. I'm an adult now, have my own house, have my own life, but every now and again, I'll think that I can still hear things. Pitter-patters in the office, down the hall. A giggle from the top of my roof. Be careful the friends that you keep.